A strange, invisible assassin stalks its prey. It attacks and hijacks the cell, forcing it to produce hundreds of new raiders. This is what happens when the microcosmos turns on us. In 2020, we experienced this invasion of the body snatchers firsthand. A tiny virus caused a global pandemic, COVID-19.
This pandemic makes me see the world completely differently because there was an invisible universe, one that covers me and is within me, that I pretty much ignored for the most part.
Maybe we ignore this other universe because it's invisible to the naked eye.
We live in a largely invisible universe. We can't see everything that's going on. Some of the biggest stuff we can't see very well, and in fact, a lot of the littlest stuff we can't either. Just because something is too small to see doesn't mean it's not important. In fact, very, very tiny things have a huge impact on our lives.
Some of these impacts are beneficial, but they're overshadowed by the devastating effects of disease.
The longest running conflict that humanity has been engaged in is that against the microcosmos, our long-running battle against the bacteria and viruses that are trying to kill us.
A century ago, we faced the Spanish flu.
This absolutely annihilated Europe at the time. It caused millions upon millions of deaths. So this is definitely not the first pandemic. It, quite frankly, probably isn't the last one.
In a way, the coronavirus has forced us to come to a greater understanding of the microscopic world.
The microcosmos is complex. While some parts kill us, others keep us alive.
The microcosmos is important for us to survive, in order for us to do all of the things that our body does, in order for us to live and grow and thrive.
Our lives depend on the microcosmos. The air we breathe and the surface of the earth around us has been profoundly affected by the microcosmos.
The invisible microcosmos operates in every part of the world.
This world that you can't see is everywhere, from geothermal hot springs to glaciers to deep-sea hydrothermal vent systems.
We have discovered that every cubic foot of Earth's atmosphere and its oceans contain millions of viruses.
There are more viruses here on Earth than there are stars in the universe. That's incredible.
Even though they're around 1/400th the thickness of human hair. Stuck end to end, all the viruses on Earth would stretch 100 million light years. That's 40 times the distance to our neighboring galaxy, Andromeda.
That really makes us ask, whose planet is this anyway? If you just added this up by sheer numbers, you would say this is the virus planet.
The microcosmos has also taken over our bodies. We're only partly human.
The fact that so little of my own body, of everyone's body, is as human cells, kind of leaves you wondering what's the rest of it made of, right?
It is astonishing that we share our bodies with over 380 trillion viruses.
And over 39 trillion bacterial cells.
The average human has more bacterial cells inside their body than there are human cells inside their body. So what are we really?
There are moments in the history of science that I actually remember where I was when they happened. When, for example, we detected 2 colliding black holes or something like that. But another one was when I realized that almost half our body is actually not human.
I mean, that is crazy.
For people that are scared of bacteria, that's a really interesting thing to know, right?
Bacteria help us digest food, produce vitamins, and even influence our mood. But what are they? Bacteria are single-celled organisms with a cell wall and a central nucleus containing genetic material, RNA or DNA. They can move around and replicate. Viruses are completely different.
In the universe, there are some mysteries that have actually personally made me kind of pause, give me goosebumps. And strangely enough, one of them is viruses.
The mystery is how viruses can have so much impact on the world, despite their tiny size and apparent simplicity. Most are just a strand of genetic material, sometimes encased in a shell of protein.
mean, compared to bacteria, which behave kind of like other normal cells that we're used to some degree, viruses are very strange. We don't really understand viruses. We don't even know if they're alive or not.
The question, are viruses alive, is actually more difficult to answer than you might think. What is the definition of life? What does it mean to be alive?
NASA's definition of life is a self-sustained chemical system capable of Darwinian evolution. Entities that feed, make energy, and reproduce.
Viruses can't do that on their own. They have to have a host cell to do that. They have the genetic material that they need, but none of the machinery. So they really have to infect a host. If not, they're useless.
Inside a host's body, viruses latch on to the surface of cells and then take control.
A virus's life cycle is effectively to hack another cell.
They have to inject that genetic material into a living cell, and then the cell is hijacked and starts making copies of the virus,
which then have to burst out of this cell, almost literally like that gory, grotesque scene in Aliens.
They burst out from the inside. That's like a cellular level horror movie.
This method of replicating is chilling and doesn't answer the question of whether they're alive. That uncertainty may influence our search for life in space.
One of the interesting things to think about is if we found a virus on another planetary surface, would we classify that as life? Would we say that we have found life?
We don't know, but space viruses could be a sign of other extraterrestrial life forms.
Viruses have to have a host cell to replicate. So if you find a virus, in essence, you've found life.
Viruses might lead us to extraterrestrial life. Now, new research suggests that life on Earth may have come from space, brought to us in a cosmic bombardment when our planet was young.